Deputy Judge President Zondo has rejected the DA's request for special access to witnesses in the state capture inquiry. Zondo says while much of what the DA had asked for is permissible in the normal workings of the Commission, the party also wanted the right to examine witnesses, which he could not allow. The Deputy Chief Justice adds that he sees no reason why the DA should not rely on the Commission's legal team. The team is responsible for interviewing potential witnesses and taking statements from them. Zondo has also reiterated that, unlike a civil litigation, there were no disputing parties. Rather, the Commission was an inquiry into certain allegations. The Commission of Inquiry into State Capture will be holding its first public hearing on Monday. Well, for this discussion, we're joined by a political analyst, Onga Mamtemka. We're joined by a constitutional expert, Professor Judge President on the phone line. We also have the NPA regional spokesperson, Paladi Shuping. A very good evening to you all, and thank you very much for joining us. Well, let me start with you, Mr. Mtinka. What are the pressing issues before the Commission?
Good evening, Rapets and your listeners. I think in general,
we'll try to get back in touch with Mr. Mtimka. Professor Guto, very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us. Talk to us about the pressing issues that you feel are before the Commission.
Well, I think it is important to point out here that a commission of inquiry, or whatever commission it is not a court of law, and therefore the parties involved do not have really to question or those who are making presentations. And I think it's the wrong move to really suggest that they want to question those who are testifying. That will come later. But at this point, it's a question of those who are testifying to do the testification and give whatever evidence they have to the Commission. But when it goes to a court of law, then there's a right to be interrogated and to be able to verify the whatever allegations or presentations that have been given. So I think that the Commission is quite correct in saying that at this point they are not allowed really to be able to question witnesses and so on. Yeah.
And Professor, just comment about the terms of reference of the Commission.
Well, I think the terms of reference are very broad and clear, and they ought to be followed. If there are any other areas where it is not clear, it will come out during the hearings and presentations which are given to the Commission. So at this particular point, I think the terms of reference do cover what needs really to be verified and to be able to be interrogated during the Commission's inquiry process. Mm-hmm. So that's where I think things are at this particular moment.
Professor, stay with us as we go across to the NPA's regional spokesperson, Paladi. Good evening to you. Paladi, just talk to us about whether the work of the Commission in any way will interfere with the work that the NPA is currently doing, or with any cases that are currently before the courts. Paladi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello, Paladi.
Yeah,
yes, I was just saying that in terms of the NPA's work, is the work of the Commission going to interfere in any way with the NPA's work and matters that are before the court?
No, definitely not. We're dealing with two different issues. They're dealing with inquiry, and we're dealing with the prosecution of a criminal matter.
Yes. And will the NPA be required to have any participation in this inquiry and make any representations perhaps on some of the allegations that have been made?
We're not sure at the moment. We have not received any notification as to whether the NPA will be required to take part in the commission.
And once the commission has completed its work, is it possible that some of their recommendations in their report might be to hand over some of the matters to the NPA then to prosecute further?
Well, as we are aware, that the NPA is continuing with its own prosecution in a criminal case where there is investigation that has been done by the police in which the Estina Dairy Farm is involved. So that's the matter that we have currently in front of our courts.
Well, we do know that that matter actually will be, we'll hear more about that matter actually on Monday with regards to that Estina Dairy Farm. Let me just come back to Professor. Professor, talk to us about the rights of the public when it comes to a commission of inquiry, because when Justice Zondo rejected the DA's request to have private access to the witnesses and, to question the witnesses, he mentioned that some of their other requests were in line with what the public can be expected to request during such a commission.
Well, I think if whatever party wants to present anything to the Commission of Inquiry, they are invited and they are welcome to be able to, and they have a right to be able to make presentations, but they can't ask to have evidence or presentations by other presenters to the Commission. So they are equal, and therefore they cannot demand that they should have really to question the other persons who will be making presentations to the Commission. And as the National Prosecuting Authority has indicated, there are two processes here which are separate and different. You have a Commission of Inquiry and you have the National Prosecuting Authority. Of course, it is quite clear that whatever comes out of the inquiry, if it points to areas where the National Prosecuting Authority need to get evidence for the criminal process, they will look at that and be able to bring that inside after investigation and to see whether it is evidence that is relevant to the issues which are for prosecution. But I don't think that anyone has a right to request a commission of inquiry to give people who are giving evidence before the commission or who are making presentations before the commission to be questioned by the other parties who are being investigated.
Back to you, Mr. Shuping, regarding the matter that is before the courts, the Estina Dairy Farm matter. There have been some reports that some of the Gupta associates are being prejudiced. Are you in a position to comment on that? Well, Mr. Shuping, regarding the case that is before the courts, the Estina Dairy Farm matter, there are some reports that some of the Gupta family associates are being prejudiced by the fact that the matter has been taking so long to come to a conclusion. Can you comment on that? We appear to have lost Mr. Shuping. Professor, just coming back to you, in terms of this commission's work, initially the public protector had actually said that the work should take 180 days, but it seems like it might take a little bit longer than that. Is that a good sign from Justice Zondo that more thorough work will be done and the credibility of this commission will be upheld?
You really can't predetermine how long a commission of inquiry should take. Of course, you set a deadline so that things are done within that period, but it may extend, it may end up earlier than the date which has been set for it to be able to finalize its work. But it is up to the commission, once it is set up, to be able to indicate how long the process takes. It depends on the witnesses, whether there are few or many. And in this particular case, I think it's a very complicated investigation which is going on, the state capture. All I can say is that, of course, the Commission is dealing with a narrow definition of state capture, focusing on the Gupta family and the people they have been relating with, including the former President Jacob Zuma and so on. But that is not all about state capture. State capture is a much wider issue, which I think would need much broader inquiry if it was necessary to do so. The question will be, what is the purpose of the inquiry, which is inclusive? But at this point, we are dealing with a specific issue of state capture, and I think that should be dealt with and done with. But there are other bigger pictures which will come out, which needs to be examined later on. State capture is not a simple thing because all states are captured in the world, and it's a question who captures them, for what purpose, and is it illegal or illegal, and all those are matters that go much broader than just the Guptas and state capture involved with the family and their businesses in South Africa.
And Professor, you know, regarding the Gupta family, I mean, there have been some concerns that the NPA seems to be losing some of its cases against the Gupta family members and their associates. Is this going to be a problem in light of the State Capture Commission, because the Gupta family members are seen as the poster boys of corruption?
Yes, I think some of them or all of them may not be in the country at the moment. It's going to be very difficult, but as long as they have assets and wealth in the country and so on, the trials, if at all it goes to court of law, can still go on in absentia if they don't want to come and present their case. But I think they will be able. Indeed, if the matter goes to court and they're being tried, to get legal representatives to represent them in the court of law. And it is up to the court to be able to see the evidence that will come before the court and the charges that are being brought against them. And that the process is still too early to be able to reach that point. But it is not as if nothing can be done. A lot can be done through the criminal prosecution process and in the inquiries that are going on without them being in the country.
Professor,
but later on, of course. Hello?
Professor, let's leave it there for now. The commission does kick off on Monday, so we'll get back in touch with you for a more unpacking of that corruption matter. And actually, you should stay tuned to Afro Worldview, because we'll be covering as much of that commission of inquiry as we possibly can, bringing you updates as and when they happen.